I want to thank everyone for coming this evening. My name is Bill Baker. I'm a Mansfield resident and local organizer. As was reported, I don't know how much you've seen in the paper, some of the discussions online. This has been an ongoing concept for at least a year, just through discussions with other community members about some of the issues that are before us and identifying as equals within the community. We don't have an extremely structured agenda for this evening. The hope is that we're going to encourage a good dialogue, and that we're going to make some good connections on how we move forward in equality and solidarity within our community. We've got some great presenters tonight. I'm going to refer to the paper just so I can be completely accurate. Aurelio Diaz is going to speak on persons with disabilities. We have Jeannie Heald from Columbus, who's going to speak on gender identity, and Deanna West Torrance, who's going to speak to us about race. We are going to stick as much as we can to the time schedule because the library closes at 8 p.m. This is probably a topic where we could have all-day workshops on each one of them to begin to understand in better ways to communicate with each other. So, I asked each of them to give us about a 10 or 15 minute presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers as well. Now, there's an exercise that I would like for you to do as the program is ongoing. There are some cards at the back that are blank that just ask how you would like to be perceived within the community. You know, for myself, I would probably answer that in a way such as a friendly volunteer member of the community, something of that nature. I don't particularly need to identify as a white male or a heterosexual male or a partially disabled male, but that's because I'm comfortable for where I'm at in my place in society. Not everyone has that ability, and partly because of the stereotypes and the prejudice that we experience in society. So I'm not here, the purpose isn't to change anyone's mind about their beliefs or their perceptions. It's just to have an honest and open conversation about how we feel. Welcome. How we feel about ourselves and others in the community. And I'll just give you a quick example on the persons with disabilities portion. You know, I get confused, even in the conversations and leading up to this. Is it a handicapped person? Is it a disabled person? Persons with disabilities seems to be a very friendly term. But I've actually, in the last week, in a conversation, come to realize that we're just talking about persons of differing abilities. And that's a very nice statement that doesn't put anything above or below anyone else. So anyways, that's been a little bit of my lesson in the past few weeks. And on that note, I'll turn it over to Aurelio and let him present, and we'll move forward. Thank you.
Come there.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
I'm good here for now. I brought some handouts, and I brought about 25. So if you'd like to take one and pass along. Thank you very much. So it looks that I'm very organized. I agree with Bill that we didn't really discuss a lot of structure because Nick and I were discussing that the most effective forums and education is really to discuss. So I did want to give you guys some stuff about disabilities. My name is Aurelio, like Bill said. I work for Richland Newhope Industries, Richland County Board of Developmental Disabilities for almost 10 years now. I do a lot of case management for 58 individuals on my caseload. And one thing I will say that something working with this population, I've learned so much how I refer to people with disabilities. I didn't realize how ignorant, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, and you're not aware of it, I guess, that I was. And working with the people that I do serve and support, I've realized that they are, as you will see in some of the bullet points here, that they are the largest minority group in this country who are, I think there's a lot of improvement that needs to be done. I still think that, I'm still waiting for our quote-unquote civil rights movement to happen. I think a lot of that has happened with, as far as terminology that Bill mentioned. When I first started working at Richland Newhope, gosh, terminology within the state had changed. We referred to the individuals as clients or residents, even though they weren't residing at place where they work at. Now it's more, it's individual. When I started at Richland Newhope, it was, we were training to refer to the folks that we work with, MR, mentally retarded. So that just seemed really natural because that's how I was trained. They, a lot of individuals with disabilities have band together the past few years, and you may have heard that that phrase, eliminate the R word. Well, they did do that. They, it went from Richland County Board of MRDD to just developmental disabilities. And it's continuing to evolve in Canada, not just Canada, but I think it started there, and it's trickling down to the States. Now you're hearing a lot of intellectual disabilities, which that doesn't sound any better. I mean, but I mean, and with developmental disabilities, that's basically a condition that you're born with or you acquire before the age of 18. Certainly, there are people who I serve, I support at Newhope who meeting them and seeing them for the first time, I wouldn't even identify disability. I thought by working at Richland Newhope, oh, everyone who works here, they have Down syndrome. That wasn't the case at all. I think that, so I learned a lot about that. A lot of the individuals I walked past the hallway with, I thought they were staff members because I had my own preconceived notion of what a person with a disability looked like. Totally different. I have people in the caseload who are very independent. They live in their own homes, they drive themselves to work, and then there are those who are on the very opposite of the spectrum. They are very dependent, staff in all areas with personal care, etc., transportation. So I guess I really wanted to kind of get an overview of that, and I think sharing my lesson of how much I've learned about and how much more respect and adoration I have for people with disabilities, especially ones I work with. So those who have packets here, I did want to kind of like break down what exactly disabilities are. If you think of something more, something more visual, that certainly falls into that umbrella. With developmental disabilities, there's a few subcategories. We have those folks who have, I always use the words have or with cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, as I said, pervasive mental disorders. And I'm not going to read all of this because this is what I gave to you guys for. On the second page here, I highlight some facts that some of these I wasn't even aware of. I'm not into statistics. We had this discussion before. It's all good and well to know them, but I don't think we should focus on them too much. As I said, I was aware that people with disabilities constitute the nation's largest minority group, and I don't think a lot of people realize that. Meaning that individuals with disabilities being a large minority group in so many aspects. Continuing education for high school, the opportunity isn't necessarily offered. Large minority in employment, huge. I work in a shelter workshop, that's what it's called, it's more of a training ground. Individuals come to Richland Industries and we teach them and train them on jobs with the mindset that this is a step one. We're going to train you and we're going to help you attain a community job. That's our goal. That's really hard because, as you know, we had a recession a few years ago. Economy's a little better. It's really hard for anyone to find a job these days. I know you guys are like, yeah. So the challenges are greater when we're trying to provide a job for, or even try to convince, like really convince an employer, hey, can you let one of our folks who we work with, I'm sorry I say folks a lot, I'm not offending anyone, at least use your business for training grounds. A lot of people just have their own stigmas about that, but the unemployment rate is very large. The state recently agreed to, they have a first initiative, oh gosh, I just messed it all up. Community Employment Initiative, I'm sorry, which is to really identify and assist individuals with disabilities early on, like in junior high. Get them prepared for wanting a job, for one, because a lot of people with disabilities in our local schools, their parents are like, oh, well, my son and daughter graduates, they're going to go to R9's workshop. That was the only option then. That's not how it is anymore. not that R9 is a bad place. But people with disabilities being a large majority in that sense, as well as just like their own personal life. I mean, wanting to get married, wanting to have a sex life if they're educated, all that stuff. I mean, we hear so many like stories you wouldn't believe within families that we work with. A lot of it is out of protection, that sort of thing. But there's one man I work with, and he's like 38, real responsible. You know, he knows all about sexual awareness and what's appropriate, what's not, and he's not even permitted to like look at a National Geographic magazine because of the nudity. That's his family's decision, and that kind of goes into a different territory of people with disabilities. Guardianship. We can talk about that for a long time. There are guardianship that's put in place not just for people with disabilities, but for a lot of people for different reasons. For those who need assistance with making those real important decisions. So, however, because of those guardianship issues, a lot of people that we work with, or people with disabilities in general, are subject to a lot of manipulation, a lot of abuse. The abuse statistic is high. It's horrible. I mean, from those who are and were institutionalized, I can't say the word, institutionalized, very great. It's a person who has either resided in a group home or in a developmental center, let's say 5 years even. Within those years, the direct workers, it's kind of a high turnover rate, not the highest paying job. In those 5 years, they say maybe anywhere between 80 and 150 workers come and go in your life. So within that time frame, I'm sure that there's some psychological, some sexual, some financial abuse going on. And we see a lot of that. And we try to do what we can to educate individuals and their families before that happens. But I feel like I'm kind of digressing here. On the next page, I just give you 10 facts on disabilities as not within the States but internationally. Very interesting. On the next page, I just kind of give you some fun and colorful some other facts so you're not so bored as I speak. And the final page, we have examples of people first language, which I've worked with an outstanding group of men and women. They call the Richland dance troupe, and they perform, and I think that they perform a lot of different styles of music, hip hop, arts, dancing, Latin, break dancing, dubstep. They're doing it all. But what is so outstanding about what they're doing is now they're actually in the school speaking and about speaking out against bullying, which is not just a school issue, it's amongst adults as well, a lot. So they're sharing, some people know that, they're sharing their bullying and mistreatment in their school years and as an adult, and then also throwing in some people first language, which kind of seems like it's common sense, but sometimes we need to be reminded how we should refer to someone. If you meet me for the first time, or if I'm introducing myself, hi, I'm Mexican American. Oh, my name is Aurelio. Well, neither one are bad things, but you don't want to be defined by how you look. I mean, you should definitely be proud of your background, where you're from, and your gender, and all those things. But we try to break the habit of, like, instead of saying the handicapped person, like you said, the crippled person, the wheelchair-bound person, it was the victim. I said the keyword is always with or have, because this person might have Down syndrome, and it might be really visual. This person, might be, in our eyes, confined to a bed, but that's not who they are. And I think we really need to educate ourselves on that, because it can be very hurtful and very offensive. So some examples is people with disabilities, instead of saying he's mentally retarded. And I do also think that people say these things and they still don't mean to be offensive. When my mother toured at Newhope, after she cried, she was so sad, because it's kind of, I think it's a generational thing too. Generation has a lot to do with how we view people with disabilities. Back in the 50s and beyond that, you're being told by respectable professionals, your doctor, your priest, your neighbor, you might, you know, the best thing to do for your child is to have them go to a hospital. That was the norm. Fast forward a few decades, you know, the concept of the developmental centers are closing down instantly. So these people who have resided in these institutions like half their life or many years, now they're expected to go into community and live a normal life. But guess what? The community doesn't want them having a group home in their community. So you can't win, you know. I forget, which I think is a positive thing. I mean,
You were
having
saying about your mom and how her reaction was kind of emotional.
yeah.
And you were equating that to maybe a generational.
Yeah, it was, yeah, because when I was very proud, you know, it's like my second year at Newhope, and I'm like, I got it, you know, I've learned, you know, I think I want to like save the world, and like, so I bring her into the area that my first year there, I worked more directly with individuals who reside at Raintree, so they're real dependent, you know, and that was challenging at first, because, you know, I'm talkative. And so, you know, second year, she came and visited the area, and I could tell she was going to cry, so I tried to push her out, and then it was too late. And I'm like, why are you crying? You're embarrassing me. And she's, you know, based on her religion, and I think also she just really felt that the person was in pain or just, it was really sad, but I think she also was looking at it from another standpoint. Since then, she's been involved with a lot of individuals from Newhope, dances and other events. She doesn't think that anymore, or if she does, she acts really well. I think that she's learned a lot from it. She knows that just because a person isn't able to use this side of their body, or they're not necessarily able to speak, or even if they're in bed and we might perceive them as a vegetable, that's not always the case. We don't always know. I mean, there's a fellow I work with, he doesn't speak and he doesn't move. But you ask him a question, over here is left, no, and over here is yes. So, I mean, there's so many variations on, you can talk for days about disabilities, but I guess I really want to leave here with, I think the community has been hugely embraced Newhope throughout the years. Newhope was started by parents when their kids weren't mainstream into the schools, or when they reach a certain age. Where the future of my kid, what's going to happen? What's going to happen when my child, when I die? Those legitimate concerns, these parents came together and they created the Newhope School, which then went to industries, which then the group homes. I mean, Newhope is quite a force. They've done so much they do a lot for individuals with disabilities from birth all the way to death. I have an 18-year-old person on my caseload and a 75-year-old person. So a lot of stuff there. I mean, but I know I have a time frame here, so are there any questions so far? I mean, yes.
Last time that I was on city council, I was talking to my ward because a group home was opening up. And
No one wants
people
that.
on the street go, oh no, our property values
Yep.
will plummet.
Yep.
It was 2007. Their property values were going to plummet with or without. So it was strange though, because they were very, very concerned that, oh my, this will be whatever. And one lady had the nerve to say to me, well, we don't have any ramps anywhere else in our neighborhood. A ramp will just kind of draw the neighborhood down. I go, excuse me? She says, well, and they won't be supervised. I said they wouldn't be in the group home if they didn't think they could handle it. Well, how will they drive? Well, they will come and pick them up when it's necessary. She just couldn't grasp the concept.
There's still a lot of that, and it's like I tried to be angry and offensive. Like in my early years, you know, I was just like that, like, you know, I was ready to like just, you know, not like verbally clock someone. Like, are you serious? Because in a way, it's still kind of permitted. I mean, that discrimination. I mean, we have folks who independently ride the RCT bus, or I live downtown Square, so if there's a person on like who kind of stands out and they have a mental illness, not necessarily a developmental disability, they put them all together, which that's just, I think, you know, just getting out there and knowing. But it's offensive because it's like, you know, it's no more different than saying that because someone's brown, black, yellow, gay, straight, it's not, it's the same, it's worse, I think, so. Yes?
I wish you'd mentioned some of the things that Newhope does as far as how much we are infiltrating the community and people don't even realize it.
Yeah, we've done a lot, I mean, and I thank God for social media and, you know, the media in general. In the past few years, with even before community employment was becoming this important initiative, downtown across from the carousel, element of art,
Yeah.
I mean, art employability, and not just even with our county, but just people with disabilities in general. You know, they're musicians, they're artists, they're speakers, but I know in Richland County, just that alone just really brought not just a Newhope presence, integrating people with disabilities, but an artistic presence that look at the downtown now. Susie and Tracy can tell you, I mean, it's like, it's so much enriching, and they certainly have contributed to that. Newhope is currently opening up a cafe in the city building. The mayor approached us about that. That wasn't us, I mean, but we're like, yeah, you know, because another training ground, more employment, enclave at the courthouse. There's a lady, and she has a disability, and that's her, through micro-enterprising, she has her own business. Stuff like that people aren't aware of. I mean, if folks came and toured our workshop as well as our wood shop, there are jobs there that are really hard. Like, I would not want to work in a wood shop. I mean, that's like some real, they're handling stuff I can't even pronounce and do. It's just so much respect and adoration I have for the folks I work with and who I've yet to meet, because people aren't aware. Like, but I think also with the success of Newhope is because the community, they're aware. We try to make our presence known. You know, it's like this person. We're not just serving people with Down syndrome. It's so much more. We're people, and they're people. So I think we went past one time. A little more.
Okay, I actually have two questions. Like, talk about you go to schools and talk about bullying. For the people with disabilities, what does that actually look like? Are people saying things to them? Are they just like people being uncomfortable around them? And then my other question is, I just moved here from Florida, and so are people with disabilities integrated into the school system? Because where I come from in Florida, in high school, we never saw anyone in our high school with disabilities. We weren't allowed to have classes with them, eat lunch with them.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of like,
I'd say it's better. I mean, even like I noticed when I was in high school, you're like in the 90s, like there was a presence in the individuals in the LD classes. Those are the LD kids, learning disabilities. And it became a joke, the short bus, all that stuff that I actively said and very ashamed of now, but I just know I was young and dumb. In the schools now, the students do have their class where they get the amount of, you know, their curriculum is different. I don't know as far as lunch periods, they are mainstream basically.
Okay. That
That wasn't the case back in the day. I go to school sometimes and I, you know, we try to meet some of the youth who are going to transition into our program if they choose to come to a program. But going back to the dancers, like I said, they've been dancing for 3 years, but and I can't even tell you how we got into the whole bullying thing. Yeah, I can. It was one of the dancers who's new to the group, went to Ontario, and her mother had mentioned it. Because, you know, Sadie, she got picked on because of her speech. And I'm like, well, I have speech problems too, so, you know, just to kind of share that. And so what we do is we have this really vibrant PowerPoint presentation, because if you're going to be presenting to any student, you want to have a visual. But we don't want to be too preachy. We talk, we introduce the dancers. They share their story if they choose to that moment. The first initial senior high event, very nerve-wracking. I share mine first. I touch on ethnicity, speech, learn disability with math, you know, that sort of thing. And then we introduce them, and they share their stories. And I think that's where everyone's like, oh, I didn't know. You know, I think that's where you either cry or you're just like, wow. That's where I'm like, wow, I love that part. And then we dance so that they get everyone. We do a 10-minute routine. They come back and we start into we tie in people first language when it's applied with with us speaking out against bullying. And we have pictures of different kids. black kid, Mexican kid, Chinese kid, kid with who's an albino, and kids who are adults who have amputations, everything, and we focus on suicide. We're very cutthroat, and I make that known to the principals and superintendents. You know, we're not going to hold back because these are, I mean, you can be bullied on your phone now. So I think it's very important, and just because people have disabilities, we're not going to come up here and do the hokey pokey dance and want, you know, just want a hug. That's not what it's about. They're adults who demand respect and be treated equally, and that's what we try to. I'm for equal rights as far as like how you treat someone, like the people I work with. So I mean, they went from like senior high kind of nervous to like Ontario, St. Mary's. They got this. So yeah, we're just waiting to hear back from a few other schools, and yeah, they're amazing. We'll have one. I was telling Deanne and Jeanne, I'm sorry. The only experience I have was at senior high, and he was a senior, and I always try to dress even more grungy when I go, so I get all the negative attention because they have like their awesome outfit. The guys are all swagged out, and the girls are all, you know, pretty. And this kid, I mean, he was just, I don't know, class clown, whatever. He wasn't really being offensive, but he was like, his gestures, and where, you know, he kept disrupting. I'm like, you know, and I told Karen, I called him out, you know, like, hey, you know, you're why we're here. You think you're funny, you know, like, we're guests, you know. It's like, and so like, all the kids are like, I know the kids would be like, ooh. And he shut up. And but I got to meet him afterwards, and he was my nephew's friend. So I guess, you know, I hope I didn't bully him in the process, but I want, in the real world, that's what I would do. And, you know, even though the youngsters were kind of like, they didn't really see what he was doing, you know, you get protective about someone you care for, so y'all would have done it too. So.
I have a question.
Yes.
So for increased equality, which do you feel is more beneficial, regulation or education on this particular issue?
I think education, I mean, certainly regulation in certain aspects, but then it kind of goes back to like, I don't know, Bill, I mean, in a perfect world with people with disabilities, I would like to see all like the physical boundaries like just kicked down to different classrooms, like, you know, that special job. I mean, they might be more assistants with a trainer or stuff like that, but I think education is key, and not necessarily just me talking to you, but touring a facility or touring a home or working side by side with the individual, talk to an individual with disability for a little bit. You know, it's kind of like, I use my grandfather as an example. Even though he was considered like a minority, he had some pretty like hang-ups on like interracial relationships very badly, and people can like, well, how can he be mad? You know, he was. So I mean, like, it's not too late because he learned at some point, you know, okay, when you meet someone, you know, who you may have had all these like judgments again, if they're not, and then afterwards you keep yourself in the ass because you felt so left. Wow, that's not the case at all. But education, like interaction with education. So.
Excellent.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.